welcome to SHOWstudio. It's our very last panel of the Spring/Summer 15 season. So it's a very sad day, but it's also a very happy day because we're talking about Miu Miu, which is always a kind of a great show, I think, for the ready-to-wear season to end on, because Miu Miu Prada has this way of kind of like, you know, just doing a little twist and kicking everyone slightly and waking them up. She's never one to sort of follow the mood of the season, so very exciting and lots of things to talk about. I've got a great set of women with me to help unpick what's happened this season and talk about what's so great about Miu Miu, why we all love Miu Miu Prada, and some of the really interesting things that I think the brand's doing at the moment with women, things like the women's tale, so lots to pick up on. But before we start dissecting and discussing, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with you, Madelaine.
Yeah, I'm Madelaine Levy. I am the editor-at-large of Bond magazine and also a fashion writer.
I'm Georgina Goodman and I'm a shoe designer.
I'm Paula Goldstein de Principe. I'm a creative director and Lou's biggest fan.
I'm Naomi Smart and I work in the fashion features department of British Folk.
I'm going to start by asking what makes Miu Miu Prada so fantastic, and are you all big fans of Miu Miu? Because it's one of those brands that I think you imagine there being a really specific Miu Miu girl, because I think the aesthetic is quite easy to pinpoint, but everyone seems to love it, even women that perhaps don't wear it. Why is that? Someone has to answer.
I was going to say, but I think she's like every girl's secret dream girl, you know? It's like when you grow up and you imagine wearing grown-up clothes, you imagine being a Miu Miu girl. I think there's something about what she does, which is the essence of like the dream of fashion for all women, no matter how they actually dress and actually show themselves now. Yeah. I think there's something of the essence of like the dream world about Miu Miu. It's
Do you
like
think that's because she plays with like growing up, and she does often play with that idea of kind of like appropriate clothing and youth versus adulthood? I think there's almost a deliberate play on kind of female progression in terms of dress. You're nodding. What's your take on Miu Miu?
Well, I love Miu Miu, but just to kind of echo what Paula's saying, she basically, I mean, Miu Miu basically is that brand that is the kind of the younger version of Prada. That's kind of how I see it. Yeah. And yeah, as Paula was saying, it's that brand that when you were a teenage girl growing up, all the things that she's very good at basically kind of elevating the real, I guess. So, you know, especially with her last collection where, you know, she looked like a lot of the girls for autumn winter looked like they could have been at a bus stop.
Wearing Jack Wells.
Bus stop with their dad's old ski jacket from the 70s, with their granny's old, you know, messed up jumper. It's those pieces that I think a lot of teenagers had in their wardrobe growing up that she's basically revisited and elevated, that I think's something that kind of it hits into that nostalgic part of you as a teenager.
Yeah, that's so true.
But I think Miu Miu is not really the younger sister of Prada. I think it's got such a different identity. Yeah. I think it really does feel like if you blink and you didn't know, is it done by the same person? You know, I just think it has such a strong identity, and it always has had.
Well, it's almost not a diffusion line.
It's not a diffusion line.
It's not,
They would say themselves, it's not a diffusion line.
Yeah,
it's
very much
its own thing, and I think seen within the group as a competitor. Yeah. Interestingly.
Yeah, that is interesting. But it kind of, I think you can sense that.
Yeah. Price-wise, it's not a diffusion line. Yeah. Style-wise, it's not a diffusion line. It's not the cheaper version of. Yeah. It's a very different customer. It has a really strong identity. Always has had. Big fan base.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that it has coincided in contemporary history with a period in which the rules for how women should age and how they should change what they wear with how they age. And I think that's something that Miu Miu Prada understood at a very important point. Like, it will no longer be a world where the rules are set and where suddenly when you turn 25 you can only wear this. And she realised that even somebody at 45 might want to wear pieces that were previously thought only for 20-year-olds. And that's what Miu Miu is very much about. That kind of shaking up of, and I think that's why a lot of people can wear it.
Definitely.
Because it's no longer a rule that a bomber jacket cannot be worn after a certain age.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that kind of sense of it being of its time, because obviously, you know, Miu Miu Spring, it's like 1992. 92. Good. Should have done some research before. But there is this sense, I think, of it being such a 90s brand, not in the style at all, but in the ethos. I think that's really interesting, and a lot of the kind of ideas of womanhood that it presents. Because I think I always see Miu Prada as a feminist designer, even though, and I think her clothes have a lot of that spirit in them, but I like that she never kind of, I think it's particularly pertinent to this season, she never makes it a trend, you know, she never does feminism, and we're seeing so much of that at the moment, whereas like the values of feminism are always something that's kind of been involved in Miu Miu and Prada, and that, I think that's part of the appeal as well.
That's her as a woman. That's what
exactly.
Comes through,
It's so authentic.
I'm not clever enough to talk about feminism, but I do know that she is a feminist, and but it's not overt, and it's not on a t-shirt, and it's not. But her clothes are accessible to all women, I'd say. Like most women want to wear them. There's not something, I wouldn't wear that, it's too racy or it's too this. So I think, does that make her a feminist? I don't know, through her fashion, but she is a feminist. She would say that herself.
Yeah, I guess, but it is connected, of course, to the 90s kind of riot girls and how they picked up certain cliches of women, what women were, how they could present themselves. And I think Miu Prada loves that, like the princess girl, the cool girl, the skater girl.
She loves those tropes, doesn't she?
Yes, exactly, and she uses them in a way that 90s kind of third wave feminism did as well. And subverts them slightly. I mean, they may be subverting them in a more kind of punk direction, where she takes it in a high fashion direction. But there's definitely a connection there, yes.
Definitely, it's interesting. What do you think about this season? I'm really interested to get your guys', because I feel like it's the season where feminism has been so commodified, and it's got quite tiresome, I think. You know, I don't know what you guys thought of Chanel yesterday, but it's not just Chanel, it's this idea that, you know, it's like cool to think for yourself this season. We talked about this on a couple of panels yesterday. Do you find, as kind of women, do you find that quite frustrating when like feminism's done by fashion?
Jumping on a bandwagon.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a trend, is it?
Well, no, it's really not a trend, but it is.
I think they've tried to make it into a trend, and the difference is with Miu Miu or Prada is that she's an educated woman, and she champions educated women, and she champions women for, you know, their creativity or their writing skills or their philosophy. And I think that's what brands should be doing if they're championing feminism, is not holding up a fake placard that's going to get them 1 million Instagram likes. It's, you know, investing in women, and that's what she's always done, even with the Miu Miu Club, where she brought together women from, like, you know, all sorts of different walks of life and put them together in a room and was like, this is an opportunity to talk, this is an opportunity to meet. And I think that's the way that fashion should be championing feminism. But then also, you know, it's strange and that a lot of these brands are run by old men, you know, so it's like, it's quite hard for them to, what is feminism to them?
Yeah, definitely.
Their way of viewing it is going to be slightly different from a woman who's always naturally strived for it.
Yeah.
And body shape is another thing that I think she is very kind to women.
Yeah.
You know,
there's a lot of empathy in the design.
A lot of empathy in the design, which is good for going across ages and body types, and so I think that's quite a feminist statement in itself. That it's not saying if you're really skinny you can wear this. You can wear it if you're any size.
It feels like the feminism is innate. It's not like tacked on.
Exactly. I think she'd say that herself as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's just something that's constant. And it's not something they're going to pick up and then actually, I'm going to be, you know, next season I'm going to be totally taken with something else that's happening. It's just, it's something that it's instilled in her, like it should be with anyone else. So, as Paula was saying, in terms of people like brands like Chanel should really be, you know, ploughing money into new initiatives with women and that kind of thing, rather than holding placards.
Chanel's feminist message must have been ironic, though. I mean, that's the thing that scares me, is I don't know if it was. Yeah. You know, because everything is so commodified that it's slightly terrifying. You know, the way they take everything, and even after the climate marches and all of those kind of things, it would have been more relevant for them to take those placards from the climate march, you know, and help promote a movement that was happening, or actually speak to feminist groups. Rather than just like literally taking a hashtag and then changing it all into
hashtag, what was it, tweed, not tweet.
It's like,
little things like that.
You know, it's like, it's slightly
terrifying
because it then makes all these young girls who have been doing like the he for she and Emma Watson and what she's been talking about and following that, and it makes it slightly silly, you know. And I don't think it should be made silly. I think it should be promoted, yes, but I don't think.
Someone said, I think it was in the Times, that the phrases that they were holding on these boards were, how did she say it? It's like a Barbie view of what protesting is. It's like, okay, I have these lines, and that's what I'm going to say, and I actually don't really know what I'm talking about, and don't know the background behind it.
Yeah, that's what made me say was this idea. It's interesting that you mentioned in the Times, it's the way that fashion will be seen by other people. Yeah. And I think that's what's so great about Miu Prada, is she is so respected, across industries, rightly so. And you kind of, that's what's sad when something like the Chanel thing happens, because you think all the brilliant work that people like Miu Prada do in championing women, just being a great person and a great mind, it's kind of undone when fashion does these stupid things.
She's a CEO, not a creative director. I think that's a big understanding the beast as well as the beauty is a major one in her favour, because she really does understand her business and has grown her business in a way that reflects her as a woman, reflects her as a person, aesthetically, emotionally. It's great role model, amazing role model. As a business person, I'd say.
I do think, just coming back to feminism as a trend part, I've been thinking a lot about what do we do now? Okay, so is it going to just disappear again in 5 minutes? But I think it's maybe the responsibility of all of us to now build on that awareness that is there, because it has kind of created a huge awareness, the way that kind of fashion and feminism have built a tie between them. And now we just have to, I think I tried to look into kind of what actually works apart from awareness. And I think there are two things. There's like theoretical grounding. You can't just be like a feminist from nowhere. You do need to kind of have actual information. There's been a lot of good writing and very specific courses, because that's what scares me a bit when I talk to young people about feminism. It's all, I'm just a feminist in general. But the fact is that has never really helped. You have to work on specific issues and specific courses and try to make improvements there. That's where activism, that's where any kind of work to try and improve the world can actually be efficient. And I'm just hoping that's where we'll go.
You're hoping that will come out? Because do you feel like the way fashion's treated it is just kind of, it's about the issue, it's not about any kind of
not by everyone, but there is, there's a risk that it goes in that direction. And that's why I'm hoping now that next stage will be like a further, maybe, theoretical grounding and more active work on specific issues and courses.
Absolutely.
It'd be very interesting to see if Chanel as a house or Carl now start trying to implement. They've shouted all about it. Are they actually going to put
programs into place or support charities or do education? Like the fashion industry, I think, number one for feminism should be making sure the women making their clothes are being paid fairly. It's like that's the absolute base level of feminism, which is something that the fashion brands can invest in and start talking about and start educating people about. And I think it needs to come right back to those core values rather than just the fact that, and also there's these huge groups of teenage girls who are following this idea, but they don't really know what they're following.
They
like they like it and they think it's a good idea and they want to feel part of it, and you've got this really captive audience, but what are you actually saying to them? No one's actually saying anything.
And I think the danger also is that feminism becomes this movement, and this could be perceived as a criticism to Miu Prada. I don't necessarily intend it that, but it becomes this kind of movement that only works if you have a cool figurehead. If you have someone like Cara holding the placard, or even if you have like someone like Lena Dunham, there's become these kind of real figureheads, and it's not become as something that you should go away and think about. It's become something that you kind of buy into, which I think is really, really dangerous.
It's by association.
Exactly, and that's always But it's interesting that you mentioned the Miu Miu Club, because I want to pick up a bit on some of those initiatives that Miu Prada does do, because I think there have been some really interesting things recently, and maybe what I just said kind of suggest that I don't think they're a good thing, but I do. I think it's an amazing thing that they're doing, especially with them. Did you guys hear about the app that they did with Miranda July?
Yeah, it was amazing.
Really amazing, you know, kind of just for the sake of our viewers. So it's kind of this amazing app called, what's it called, Together? Or hang on.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I wrote it down. It is called the Somebody Project. So it's based on this idea of a new way to communicate, because texting and email are boring. So you send a message and someone who's near the person you want to send it to delivers it verbally. So like really sweet idea, and they kind of partnered. And it's all a big part of this broader kind of the women's tales thing. Do we like it when fashion brands are kind of getting culturally and socially engaged? Because not many people actually do that, and it's interesting because I see a lot of parallels between the Gentlewoman, how they do like the Gentlewoman Club and that kind of a thing. Do we love that side of Miu Miu? Is it really important?
I think it's important to her, so it feels relevant. I think it's not a marketing ploy. You know, I don't like it when I feel like it's a marketing ploy, but in her case, I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I think it's really nice to see somebody being who they are.
Also, it's kind of, you know, as women, we're not just looking at shoes and handbags and, you know, kind of computing that. We're living people that have so many different other references, whether it's music, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
So whether it's, you know, I'm listening to a certain band or following a certain playwright, you know, she's tapped in to these people and just putting her take on it and bringing, you know, she's kind of this kind of curator. That for myself, you know, any brand that kind of does that I'm obviously following their vision on clothes, why wouldn't I follow their vision on lifestyle, and having kind of, you know, seeing if maybe they don't have the same view as me, but I'm interested by it.
You're interested in it, yeah. It's interesting you say that, because also not just pertaining to women, we talked about that so much on these panels, that's also like how you build a successful business now. Consumers are so much smarter, they don't want to be sold a pair of shoes, they want to be sold kind of like
it needs to have a narrative a little bit more into it than,
But I feel like a lot of brands, it's such a kind of tricky time to be a brand, and I think brands are playing really safe, and I feel like even though brands are perhaps aware that they need to build this kind of sense of a world, they don't quite know how to do it, and it's really hard to do it authentically. I think we see some really bad examples of people trying to do stuff.
Well, I think Prada's lucky in so much as it's her brand.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
she's built Miu Miu up, she's built it, it's always been hers, and I think what's harder for brands is, you know, these old houses when the new creative director's coming in, and then they're trying to kind of awe in their sensibility and then also take on the sensibility of the house, and then what is that pure voice? You know, I think it's trying to mesh things together, whereas Miu Miu's a very clean voice in a way. You know, it's 100% her rather than...
It's a brand, you know. I think quite often people will come in as a creative director to something that's got a name, but is it a brand? Or redefining what that brand is, and that's really hard. That's the hardest trick in the book.
Do we think that shoppers really notice that? I've been thinking a lot about that this season, because it's kind of is like the season of the new designer. Do you think that does disrupt the kind of shopper experience? Do you think they notice when Marc Jacobs left and Nicolas Ghesquière took over at Louis Vuitton?
I would say, in so much as I had a friend who was an actress and she was going to the Venice Film Festival and she went to Dior, and she called me in like a panic, French actress, like, it's all hideous. She's like, I do not look beautiful in any of this. And I was like, it's amazing, it's rap. And she was like, but I look like a marshmallow. And I think so in that sense, you do notice, because maybe Dior is not the brand you go to look absolutely stunning on the red carpet anymore. It's the place you go to now to make a fashion statement. So I guess there's that obvious change in what they're...
Yeah, it's interesting that, because I kind of feel like we as the fashion pack forget that, because we get so excited by new movements, but I just wonder what your average girl who goes into a shop and loves buying Loewe or Jill Sander or any number of the new houses, Dior, and if they actually look at it and go, this isn't what I want, this has changed, and how disruptive that is, and maybe that is the success of things like Prada and Miu Miu, is that clear voice.
Yeah, I mean, the ones who do buy the clothes are more and more educated. The ones who buy the perfume in the airport, for them, I mean, they probably don't, but it doesn't really matter, because the sunglasses and the perfume won't change that much anyway. So, of course, they're different customers. But I think the ones who pay however much a Dior gown would cost, they probably have heard of this, I'm guessing. And I think, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about these kind of new markets, and I think that's really where I can sense a very quick change. Russian customers now are not, I mean, as we like to kind of theme, like uneducated or just buying into a brand. It's just not true anymore. They've got great websites. They've got so compared to the total of the population, obviously it's still a small part of society that can afford even caring about these things. But the ones who do are, in my experience, very knowledgeable. Brazil as well. It's not just these kind of.
It's like buying art, I guess. You know, the people who can really afford to go into the galleries and buy those pieces are aware of the artists, and they, you know, and they educate themselves about it. And I guess at that absolute top end of fashion, people are educating themselves.
Also, I think it's quite interesting to bring in shop assistants at this point. So if you've got a really good brand and you go into, I went into the Miu Miu store, the girl was amazing, you know, really, cute, really educated me, great sound bites, thank you very much, you know, she really knew.
Which store were you in? We should give her a shout out. Were you on Sloane Street?
In the Sloane Street one.
Okay, good.
Fantastic she was. And I just said, you're really good, you're more than a shop assistant, because she is the front line to the customer. They need to be educated, they need to be enthused, they need to understand the brand. She completely understood. It was her that said to me, we're not a second line, we're not a diffusion.
She sounds brilliant. We should have got her.
You know, I just think having a great front of house. I've always maintained that it's amazing if you've got someone really great selling your product. You know, if I've ever got product in Harrods or Harvey Nichols, I'll always go and speak to the shop and say, oh, did you know about this? And tell them about the product they're selling. It really works well.
And I think their role is even more important now, because this idea of buying stuff online but going into a shop to try it on, in a way you value that interaction even more than you once did when it was the only way you shopped. So it's quite interesting. I think it's interesting. On these panels we talk so much about things like campaigns and streams and that side of fashion, and you forget the actual consumer experience of physically going in, buying,
like closing the loop, basically. The actually important bit that keeps the whole thing going.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an expensive overhead having a store. It's a really expensive overhead, millions of pounds each store. And I think that they do have to really reflect, and you've got to have the right people in there. It's really important. I love going to stores. If I'm buying something really expensive, I won't go online. I'll definitely go and try it on first.
You want that experience.
Absolutely.
It's interesting you mentioned that in the context of Prada and Miu Miu, because I wanted to ask about that particularly because we have you here, Paula, and you're a bit of a kind of digital whiz. Because I feel like Prada have a really odd relationship with the web. I feel like in some ways they use it really, really well, Prada and Miu Miu, with great film content, content, brilliant, but e-commerce side not
She's
so
not
much.
Into it.
No, she's not.
I know from having worked on projects, she personally is not into it. She doesn't want people buying her stuff online. Fundamentally, she's like, I do not want people buying my things online.
Because there was that quote, it wasn't from her, but what's that guy's name? He said, why would I want someone buying our coat that's also buying like a used car? Which I just thought was a really silly thing to say, but I kind of get the ethos. But do you think you can still look down on e-commerce today?
I think that a few brands can. I think a very few brands can.
Yeah.
You know, I think if you are Miu Miu, you're Prada, you're maybe parts of Vuitton, not the accessories, but the ready-to-wear. You know, I think there's certain people who, because your client is so specific at that level, and they want, as you said, that experience. They want to come into the store. They have the time. They have the money. They want to do that. But I think, you know, for most brands, if you're starting out as a brand now, it's vital, you know, to build a platform behind you and build a fan base and build this thing that pushes you out there. If you look at, I mean, they're not luxury fashion brands, but if you look at like Nasty Gal and Reformation, they've built whole business models on Instagram followings. And I think, you know, that's really, really important now, is to kind of know that you've got an audience and connect to those people in the right way. And I think more and more it's going to become that way. There's a new website called Thread, which is actually being mainly used by men, and it's a stylist service. And they put you in direct contact with a stylist. They email everything you need. The guy's like, I'm going on this business trip, I'm this size, this size, this size, and they go to all the different e-commerce sites and package it and send it all to you. And they're like, and you can send whatever you don't want back. But that kind of like taking, as you said, the store service and then connecting it to people, especially men, you know, they're saying businessmen who don't really like the store experience, they find it a bit awkward being, you know, trying on those certain things, that can't be ignored. Or if you're in China or Russia, you think how big those countries are. Yeah. You'd be traveling for like 4 days to just go to the store. Yeah. You know, so there's definitely, it's something that can't be ignored, but I do think certain brands can err on the side of not having to.
Yeah, it should be sad as well.
The show starting, it's just Frozen, as I said that, which is fabulous.
She's slowly jumping down the
stairs, throwing herself off.
She's going to slide down that banister.
Here we go. Hopefully we'll have an okay stream, but we can look at images afterwards.
It's very ladylike already. Yeah.
Which is interesting, because I was going to pick up on what we were talking about at the start about that kind of young, I think it was you Naomi that talked about teenage, which is interesting because I really feel like there's a Lolita element to Miu Miu that's particularly kind of been exacerbated in the last 2 seasons. You know, it's always been there, but things like the schoolgirl socks and even like last season with all that plastic. Why does that feel and a lot of people are doing that at the moment, why does that feel very current in fashion, this kind of idea of it's a project we're doing on SHOWstudio at the moment, but why does girlishness and Lolita-esque feel very relevant?
I don't know, do you know what? I think actually there's a real shift to womanliness.
I agree. Yeah.
I think that's, and we've started to see it this season, it's like, you know, and even, you know, girls dressing at the shows and stuff like that, you know, they've really polished up. Yeah. You know, a lot of the girls I saw during shows are wearing, you know, pencil skirts, with a little cute cashmere sweater and maybe like a nice little pendant or whatever. It's just very pared down, kind of take me seriously kind of wear that I think a lot of designers are kind of looking at, and actually kind of this is mirroring it. Yeah.
Well, to me that's also slightly weirdly a nod to feminism, because she looks like, you know, she looks like almost like the 80s woman who can walk into a boardroom and be like, you know what?
Yeah.
Don't mess with me.
It's such a contrast to last season with all that kind of like plastic, which was so, I don't know, it just felt like totally different to this kind of.
But when you see it in store, it does feel more rich.
Yeah,
You've obviously got your pink anorak, but you've also got a nice bit of fur and great sheepskin coat. Stripes, big for spring, summer. There we go.
You know, it's still girly and playful in the tops, but I think the girl's attitude, she's a bit more like, I know what I want. Fearsome. You know.
Well, you had her with the hair stuck to the lip gloss, and this is a very different vibe to that. You know, she's not dishevelled, is she? She's very much more in control.
That's very sexy. It's much more woman.
But it's interesting because we say sexy, but I always feel like Miu Miu's a little bit like fetishy as well. Like it's kind of like that dangerous sexiness. It's a bit. It can make you a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. I don't think it's not like pandering.
And sexiness.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
But I actually think this season is just real sexy in that she's a strong woman. Yeah. Last season, you're right, it was very like a bit twee Lolita-y.
Yeah.
Or sort of Lolita geeky, wasn't it?
Yeah. This feels more Prada-y as well.
Doesn't it? It really does.
Really does. Like old school Prada as well. Like this could be like 90s Prada kind of redone. I hate the stream, I want it to work.
There's just such, we're seeing it throughout the whole collection, so obviously it's like at the moment there's this whole, like, that 70s show, like there's such a 70s influence, but it's not even that, it's kind of, there's such a retro feel now. Yeah. Like it's like, you know, you look at Vuitton, you look at Saint Laurent, you look at Miu Miu, it looks like these girls have maybe stepped out of a vintage store, but it's kind of got those, you know, every designer's take onto it.
Do you think that's a reaction to minimalism? Is it a reaction to normcore? What's that kind of retros? Because it's quite also a eclectic nostalgia, an eclectic retro.
But I think
it's not clean.
It's almost, as you said, the normcore reference. You know, I've just been in Italy for a while, and the women still dress. You know, that even to go and get their loaf of bread, they still dress, and it's the same in Paris. And I think it's a reaction to not dressing. It's a reaction to just putting on, like, as we all do, you know, our comfy, easy clothes. I think it's the vintage references are like, oh, I've got to wear a nice pair of shoes because I can't wear trainers with this pencil skirt because I look like a mad person. You know, it's the way of putting yourself together.
Yeah.
But I also think this is more like a Parisian brand now, and Prada is more of an Italian brand.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, their headquarters, I think, are in Paris.
They show there.
They show there, and I just feel that it has that Parisian girl-ness about it.
Well, it's that kind of dishevelled sexiness.
Dishevelled sexy,
Which is, there's that famous Prada quote which people always talk about, which is, you know, the more sexy you're trying to look, the less sexy you do look. And I feel like she gets away with doing things that perhaps are more intentionally sexy in Miu Miu because it is slightly more dishevelled.
But we're seeing that a lot in all the connections, like so many, I don't know if you guys have noticed, like there's all that kind of undone raw edges on everything. But it's that kind of, you know, but again it's very polished. So, you know, in Prada she had all those amazing antique fabrics, but they would, you know, you could see the stitches on top and it looked very kind of like, I don't know, like your granny had taught you how to sew, but you've got that kind of intrinsic idea of what's feminine and what's beautiful, but you're kind of mixing it up with all these kind of raw edges.
I think that's a social comment as well about, you know, recession. It's not recession dressing, but it's about putting small bits of fabric together and stitching them together, make do and mend.
Valuing your clothes, you know, and being that reference to the generations before us who used to value their clothes and used to still, you know, I've still got my grandmother's coats and they're fine because she darned them when they you know, there was something wrong with
the longevity of it.
But it's not like a Primark dress that you wear for one weekend and it falls apart and you don't care
anymore. I don't think it's Primark, I think high fashion's become quite
But I think you're right.
But I feel that there is a responsibility coming. You know, I think designers are lead, especially someone like Miu Prada, leading the way, saying you can buy this. You don't have to throw it away next season. It's going to be fine. You can wear this for 3, 4, 5 years till it falls apart.
Yeah.
We don't need any more clothes on rubbish dumps.
Yeah.
You know, it's.
Yeah, all the clothes that are coming out, I just feel they're very timeless.
Very timeless.
Very timeless, and just because, you know, they're pieces. They're like, you know, we can watch every show I've pretty much seen this season. There's ideas there, but it's like, what do we actually want to wear? Oh, I want to wear those shoes, that top. That, you know, you can. It's really sellable in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, lots of separates that can be combined, different things, and
I feel like even in the way the collections feel quite. Each collection in itself can feel really wide. I feel like we've seen that a lot this season where it's much harder to date something. And I think there was a while where like you could say like everything was about, you could really pick a piece and say that was this season, whereas it feels much more like designers are trying to make things where you couldn't really date it, you know, even by digging into their own archives.
But interestingly, talking about digging into your archive, I've got a pair of Miu Miu shoes, almost identical to the shoes are on
to those ones,
and it's like, it's great. I think, great, I'll fish those out.
And they do. I mean, they do that a lot with Miu Miu. After all, it's not that different. It's,
but I feel like a lot of the, I guess because my head's filled with everything that's coming out of Paris, but like, you know, Miu Miu Saint Laurent, Louis Vuitton, I look at things and go, oh, I've got that in my wardrobe. I'll pull that out. Oh, it's the cowboy boot, or it's the ski jacket, or it's it's kind of, this all feels very accessible.
Yeah, but it's this interesting idea of like proposing dressing rather than trying to get people to buy stuff. It's almost like suggesting a way you can make yourself look.
I don't think they're being that generous.
I don't think they are, but I think there's like I talk to a lot of young British designers about this, and they often say that they're happy with. That's how they get people to buy into the brand. It's getting people to love the aesthetic, and then you get them to buy the pieces. And I feel like that kind of spirit has.
Yeah. I guess also with Miu Miu, the campaign is always really, really important to what the season is.
Yeah.
It's not just the show. That kind of next key always comes with the campaign and how it's used there and on. Well, what girls or women they choose to dress for that. That's kind of the last kind of piece of the puzzle, so to say.
We should do
and
it
often starts making sense.
Yeah, who they're going to dress.
Who's going to be the next campaign girl?
But they have the most quite diverse women when you think about, you know, even last season when they had that like epic front row. But like Rihanna is so different to like the girls from Blue is the Wall's Colour, who is so different to like Lena Dunham, who's doing loads of stuff with them, to Elfa. Exactly, it's really, really diverse, which I think is quite interesting.
But that's the great thing about Miu Miu, is that you can be who you want to be. They have all of these different types of women that they champion.
Yeah.
You don't have to set this certain mould. And I think that's
you can create your character.
Create your character. But also I feel like there's actually a lot in all of the collections. There's been real characters. It hasn't been necessarily one certain trend. It's just it's like the age of the real woman. You can decide to be, it's 1970s rock chick like Alain Salomon. You can be this quite, I don't know, womanly silhouette here, or you can be really pared down at Celine. I don't know. You can be whoever. There's so much choice out there now. It's kind of amazing.
Do you think though that's part of like the social media like rise of like the girl? That everyone is now looking for their icons, and they can be very different icons in the same way as like sometimes I'm like, oh wow, this amazing hippie moon woman who's got like 50 million Instagram followers.
And then you decide you're going to be like an earth woman.
And then you can be an earth woman, and I think it's
like chameleon dressing.
And like having all these different icons and latching onto those women.
But that's so fun, no?
Yeah.
So fun that you can be able to be these different people.
But I do
best
think
shoes of the season. Those
I agree.
Incredible. I love the way she plays with it was interesting what you were saying before about kind of those tropes that she messes around with, and I always feel like she picks things that are kind of like to do with traditional femininity. So even like some of this looks like kind of 90s girl power things, or there's a little bit kind of boudoir-y with the shoes with the bows, or the schoolgirl thing as you mentioned, and I feel like she's really doing that this season. It is almost like classically beautiful girly things like a pink coat and a crop top and big heel, but she always makes it feel very modern, and it's almost, I think it's more impressive to attack those things because Celine always feels separate from that because it's so minimal and it's not taking its starting point from anything relating to how women have traditionally been suggested to dress, whereas this always riffs on that, so it feels even more challenging, I think.
No, definitely. There's even a tiny bit of kind of historical dress with the blouses and things.
Exactly, with the ruffles.
Exactly. That feels like something new to Miu Miu, though. I don't think I've seen those kind.
You don't think of it as a historical?
No, I think so, but I think kind of using that kind of like a historical trope is quite new for Miu Miu. It's not something she usually kind of puts into that mix.
No, absolutely.
As far as I can remember, at least. And maybe, I don't know, because Miu Miu did resort for the first time in a long time. I think it's quite rare that they do it. They did that this year. And that was very kind of easy retro luxe, kind of 70s, and maybe this is a little bit of reaction to that. It's a bit like, okay, I followed the rules, I did resort, I did 70s like everyone should, now I can do what I want.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's interesting, we've all talked about things being retro and nostalgic, but I do think this is harder to date than...
I was thinking it looks quite Rita Tushingham 60s to me. That's what it looks like.
But then there's really 90s bits in it as well. Really 70s.
And then there's wedges.
It's like she's got a blueprint, and she's just like, the pencil skirts with the big belts. She's kind of like got this kind of sexy secretary, and then just got a pair of scissors and like cropped her top off, put a pair of wedges on, slicked her hair back. Yeah. She's kind of that.
But I quite like that idea of a girl.
That's like you've got your wardrobe, and you've taken that from that era, that era, and I think that's.
There's something quite seductive about not quite getting it right, trying to dress appropriately but getting it wrong.
It's like running through a vintage shop, really, and you're kind of trying to make different eras work together.
Yeah. But I think she's been interested with appropriateness for a while recently. She talks about that at her last men's, she talks about that at her last, at the women's less so, but kind of more at the men's. And I think this feels a little bit about that, like what you can wear with what, and like trying to look appropriate and formal but slightly getting it wrong, and it is a very playful idea. I like that. Cause it's almost making high fashion look a little bit awkward, which she always does, I think. Have we got any pictures in yet, Liam? Just because the stream was a bit confused, to say the least.
Too many people are watching it.
I know. I think also they were streaming from a church, so it was one of those kind of venues where I imagine they didn't have the best.
So many people have shown in churches.
I know, fashion's very spiritual, clearly.
Very spiritual this season,
What does this say about the season? Because we've said that it fits in with the kind of general nostalgic mood, but I always feel, I said this right at the start, I always feel like she kind of like kicks the season a little bit, like she's like, oh, you go this way, I'll go that way, and she kind of flips everything on its head.
Yeah, so it's kind of you do 70s, I do 60s.
Yeah.
You do loose and I do slightly stricter.
Yeah.
I guess. You want to see it as...
No, you're right, because the pencil skirt, we haven't really seen that much at all this season. Lots of
neatly belted.
But I think a lot of people have got a pencil skirt in their wardrobe, so I think that's quite... You were saying something about, is this about a style, suggesting a styling, and that's quite generous. I think that is quite generous, that you don't have to go and buy the whole total look. You can use that pencil skirt and
but it's very accessible in that way. You know, girls up and down the country who, you know, can't afford to buy a £3,000, you know, coat or pencil skirt from Miu Miu can very easily recreate that look and get that essence of what she's about. From a vintage store, from their wardrobes.
Just going back to the thing about e-commerce, do we find it weird that they do put, I know this stream was a bit dodgy this season, but usually they do impeccable streams, particularly with Prada, you know, like really well directed, so you can see the accessories as much as you can see, you know, the fashion. Do we find it weird that they're doing all this amazing film content, all these kind of cute editorial projects, streaming their shows, but then they're not kind of making use of e-commerce?
Well, it's not certain that it's such a bad business idea, because e-commerce is at its beginning, and it's a very expensive thing to run still for a lot of companies. You have 40% returns, a lot of customers more or less demanding, if not free shipping, at least free returns, which is a huge cost. Again, that size of China, just kind of having things shipped back to wherever, it's huge. Sometimes I think it's maybe, I mean, France are quite interesting like that when it comes to technology as a country. They're very late, like people didn't have email in France, you had to kind of fax your show in, like, when you wanted to go to a show, your requests for a long time. But when they did get it, it was so late in the stage that they suddenly had perfect, amazing internet almost everywhere, because they waited and they let the other countries take kind of the cost of developing it and making mistakes.
Paris.
I'm sure it's partly about this kind of a personal choice, etc. But it's not certain that they will lose out just because they launch, like they have e-commerce, but it's not very good. So maybe just because they wait for 5 years, or maybe that's too long, but a few years, and just make sure that the kind of structure is in place to make it profitable. They might, you know, be winners anyway. I'm not sure that their strategy is just
No, that's interesting, because you think if you come in and then you do things that perhaps other people aren't doing, so whether it's, you know, like better product imagery where you can like actually view videos of the, you know, things like that lots of brands are now trying to do, where you can like actually move the items on the screen and you can speak to a stylist, you know, on live chat, all these things that people are trying to do.
Like body scanning and kind of submitting your actual
she'll do something
body
like that.
and things like that I'm sure it's going to come. And I also do think that it's a little bit like with music, that everybody just kind of started taking for granted that they could steal anything and listen to anything for free. And then, I mean, a lot of us are now paying for some kind of, I don't know, Spotify Premium or whatever. Maybe this dream of having everything shipped to us for free and having everything kind of, you can ship, like, buy however much you want, try it all on, and then ship it back for free. Is not going to last. We'll see, or maybe some new company will come up and, you know, assure that can be done cheaper for the companies, but at the moment it's a huge cost.
And also I think for someone like her that has such a strong appropriate hold on her brand, which is why it's so popular and successful, online is a little bit
I think that's
uncontrollable, and I think that's where she is still investing and opening more stores and investing in that side of her business.
Because streaming the show and all the videos, it's like showing her culture,
and they've controlled
and
that,
it's controlling
very controlled.
the view of the culture of Miu Miu and Prada. Whereas I think, you know, as soon as you start selling, as you said, it's expensive. So most brands sell with big e-commerce sites because they've got the distribution set up, which is your cost. That's your only real cost of like e-com, is the distribution. And so lots of people are still kind of working their way out and doing it through these big hubs. And someone like her probably doesn't want to give that that control to like an e-com store and the way they'll show her clothes and package her items.
No, that's not in her. That's not in her.
It's interesting.
So I think it's about the distribution becoming cost effective for these houses in their own right, so they start to run their
own e-commerce. That's what she will do.
Because she's. So that's interesting. This idea of controlled message. I think that's really interesting, because that's what I find silly about certain brands that don't make use of the web at all, because you're just not you're letting all the noise be the voice of your brand, and I think she's very smart at putting out enough noise that it feels like she has a voice, but then keeping stuff back so it's not like someone else deciding for her. What do we think of the clothes? Now we can see them a bit better.
Yes. So it looks more elegant in the pictures than what I gathered from the live stream, I must say.
Yeah.
Here it looks a bit neater and kind of less fuzzy and sharper somehow.
Even like a waist belt. I haven't seen one of those for a while. You're going to be digging back into my wardrobe and trying to find.
Well, there's been a lot of belting, like kind of harking back to the 70s, with the kind of a high waist or tunics with belts. We saw it in lots of shows, but yeah, the waist is kind of a bit of a...
And is the handbag hanging from the belt there?
Yeah.
Is that how it works? Okay.
Oh, so it's like a sassy utility belt.
Yeah, exactly. Like a bum bag, but dropped.
Yeah. It's the evolution of the fanny pack.
It's interesting materials, because one of the biggest things I love about Prada is the use of kind of like deliberately bad fabric, deliberately like slightly uncomfortable fabric, and it always looks a little bit
like a pair of old curtains.
Yeah, exactly. I think she does that really, really well.
Or the kind of like frilly tops that look like you could buy them in like Intimacy or some really cheesy.
Exactly.
Yes, I mean the trope this time, at least that first part that we've seen, it's almost the Vixen. It's like red and black and cleavage and...
Exactly.
That's very sexy.
Yeah.
If any of your friends walked into a party dressed like that, you wouldn't know where to look.
You'd notice.
Especially look 6.
Yeah.
You can almost see her nipples.
But then it's interesting to see like 7, 8 and 9, because this really chimes with what we saw at Prada for me, that kind of really all that incredible brocade, but the sense of like old fabrics and
the suede panels.
Yeah, that really chimes with that, which is a bit of a departure from the beginning, where it's kind of very, very sexy. Whereas this is it's that ugliness that we always talk about with Miu Prada, where she deliberately used things that are a little bit jarring on the eye.
Yeah, this is more like old furniture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like very homespun. It's that lifestyle of, you can imagine those being someone's curtain or those being the panels from someone's armchair or something.
Yeah, it's patched up rather than patchwork, isn't it?
And to me, that's very 70s.
Yeah.
That like slightly erring on bad taste whilst being very sexy is very 70s.
Yeah.
It is.
But the styling's quite interesting, even just the way the sleeves are really like pushed up. It's kind of makes her look a little bit kind of like all the fabric around there. It's not actually that attractive, but it makes her look quite powerful and quite.
She's got a swagger.
Got arms,
she's got a swagger.
And also, you know, when you roll your arms up, it's like if I'm working, I naturally roll my arms up on my coat.
Power housewife.
Yeah.
Power housewife.
Yeah, it is a power housewife.
It's a basket.
A basket with a laptop in it.
And a baby on her back.
I wouldn't mind seeing the shoes though.
Yeah, we'll have to go. Do we have close-ups as well? We'll have a look at close-ups afterwards.
Yeah.
It's quite a 50s shoe, isn't it? The first.
But it's like a bedroom shoe. A chunky shoe. It reminds me when Carrie goes and buys those horrible sex shoes in Sex and the City. It's a little bit like that.
A fluffy slipper.
But it feels like Prada, like, God, how many seasons ago, when they did the very pointy shoe with the little bow and the socks, and it was, and a lot of designers, it was that return to the woman. It was very, very, it was probably, God, like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And that is a default setting. If you want to do girly, you go 50s.
Yeah. But I feel like ladylike has fallen from fashion. We're seeing a lot of kind of like ease and casualness, and we're seeing a lot of girlishness. And then you see a lot of dressing up, but it's not particularly about femininity. It's just about like, you know, what you're seeing for people like Trans and Marius.
Ladylike is easy, actually.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at like most French girls' wardrobe, the ladylikeness is a really simple like cashmere sweater and some high-waisted navy trousers.
Yeah. And a great coat.
It's easier almost to be ladylike than to be like slovenly and like normcore, because you have to keep adding all these extra bits to try and...
And very much about the size of your bag as well. I think that
it's
the
proper
handbag it's very lady when it's a small bag like that.
But it's kind of like bad lady, you know, like she's wearing a pencil skirt, but it's like made from an old pair of curtains. It is still that kind of twist that she always manages to do.
Very Miu Miu. That's the thing she does so brilliantly.
Yeah.
That's ladylike, but it still has a kind of edge to it.
I like that it's more grown up, because I feel like everyone is doing stuff that feels really youthful, and it got a bit schoolgirly, and this feels like a real complete departure from that.
Oh yeah.
But that look here, what was it, look 24, that jacket reminds me, do you remember when they did it? It was Prada did all the denim.
Yeah.
It was the elevating of all these, you know, day-to-day fabrics. So you'd have a lovely dress coat, but it would be in denim and it would be, you know, embellished with crystals and things like that.
Yeah.
Just gorgeous. And I think that, I feel like it's kind of from the same kind of mood board. It looks very, very similar to what I was expecting.
Also, I guess maybe this is her comment on feminism, is that it's like, come on girls, take some action now, rather than being the cute girl of last season. It's not the obvious hold up a placard, but all these girls that like they could walk into a boardroom and go, look, I've got an idea, take me seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not playful in that kind of, I feel like we've had a lot of kind of coquettishness.
Yeah.
And I feel like, that can be subversive and it can be challenging, but also I think it's become a bit of a trope, this idea of kind of like, girl power. It's a bit like, so it's nice to see something there, as you say, that looks a little bit stronger, but more traditionally. Can we see close-ups? What's our take on...
Just when I get excited when I start seeing the accessories. Yeah, bags and shoes.
There's a similarity to last season with the padding, and which is a signature.
It's a bit of a Margaret Thatcher bag, which I quite like. With this idea of
I'd take someone out.
Someone you can like whack across the face. I quite like that.
I love white bags. Something about white bags.
The Essex girl.
Yeah, it's the Essex girl. And also you've got to keep it really clean.
Yeah.
You basically can't put it down.
Yeah,
you have to put it on the table.
Yeah.
You can put that down, dance around it, couldn't you?
Exactly, but you'd have to put something
on the floor.
You'd have to put your boyfriend's coat on the floor.
You'd have to go to Hotel Cost where they have the little seat for your handbag. And
I love that. Or
you
can
get
one of those hooks.
Yeah, there's hooks.
So you put on the desk, the hooks that you can attach and then hook your handbag on their fabric.
Very Italian, that is. Very Italian.
Yeah, it's very
I'm surprised Prada hasn't come up with something like amazing little bag hooks that you can like literally just like put up and put your...
They probably do have them.
Maybe that's what the version is with the belt.
Maybe that's so you can hook it to your belt and dance.
They have them at Louis Vuitton, I know that. I saw someone buying one.
They have one?
I'm sure, I don't know if they still have them, but I remember someone buying a Louis Vuitton handbag hook.
So you can hook it onto your belt? Oh my god, that's amazing.
This is only until you go to Sweden, country of utility, where every restaurant has got hooks underneath. Like everywhere you go, there will be hooks underneath the tables.
We need that.
Just our backwards Brits who don't have that.
Yeah, that's real technology. That's real technology. Forget email and stuff. You need bag hooks under tables.
And you've been recycling for years.
Yeah.
I love the shoes because they're really like, almost like D&G, like really kind of.
They're like my dream shoes when I was 15.
Exactly.
They're absolutely...
They're very Miu Miu. They're actually very... I've seen her do that.
They're 90s
before.
Miu Miu.
They're brilliant.
Yeah, they're great.
But it goes right back to what Naomi said right at the start. I think the reason women love it is because you can't help but emotionally identify with it, whether it's remembering trying on your mum's clothes, or the first time you wore a pencil skirt, or your school uniform, or the first pair of heels you got. There is all these kind of senses of things that you wore yourself, and she kind of turns them back and gives them to you.
There's a thread. There's a very clear thread through all of it.
Exactly.
There's the giant Burberry check. Well, it looks like it's similar to Burberry check.
But I like number 11 is really interesting actually, because that kind of is that just like a white dot, or it looks almost like the fabric's kind of peeling off, and it's quite interesting, that kind of sense of things being a bit dishevelled.
It's like the inside of a raincoat, when you buy a raincoat and it's got the lining, the plaid lining.
I feel like this season it's all about details. Like everyone's really, Phoebe Philo, she kind of is the queen of details, with the huge buttons and then the kind of ceramic jewellery that she's got, little weird hand like cupping the boobs of the models. And, all the frayed edges and the stitching and Celine had these amazing embellished cutouts in their tunics. And I don't know, I kind of feel like that people have really kind of honed in on all the fastenings and details and cuts and...
But I think it's interesting because I thought that for a while, when it's been going on for quite a few seasons now with that kind of obsession with handmade stuff, and I always think it's interesting when you see collections that are made for the wearer rather than made for the viewer, and I think one thing that Prada does really well is kind of get the balance between both, and I think that's really, really hard to do. Something that kind of, there's little things that you, the wearer, love each time you wear it and you notice, and perhaps very personal and intimate to you, but then it also looks really great to a viewer, and I think that's really hard to get that balance right, which is what's really interesting about the collections. I do really love the bags. They're quite tacky, but in a really...
Number 20 reminds me of like, you know, what's that awful... Oh, I shouldn't say it. Everyone's seen it. It might be an advertiser. It begins with F and it's Italian. It looks like one of those. Yeah. It does. Yeah. You're right. It looks quite like a tacky...
Like a wipe clean kind of a bag.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's very expensive boxcar.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see it from the side though, because there's more volume in it than there appears. Obviously, from always this is the case.
Yeah, look. I mean, that is like such a beautiful silhouette. You know, that really tapering into the waist, and then having that balloon skirt is very, very flattering.
I like how eclectic it is when you look at it.
Crazy, weird bags.
Yeah, they look like Robert's radios.
My aunt would have. And you would really like.
Yeah.
But they're a little bit wrong.
But it is that sense of stealing things from your grandparents or your aunties or your mum, and I think that's
vintage bag. Because there's been this sort of trend for teeny weeny bags, and then there's like enormous bags, and you know, like getting the bag size right.
But these are just
quite
proper
difficult.
handbags. You know, where you have your exactly what you need.
Yeah, your remote control.
26
cigarettes.
is beautiful, and that feels quite different. That real primness and it's not really embellishment.
That looks like a snapshot from like I don't know 18th century or something.
Exactly.
It's like a.
But I do think it's this eclectic kind of vintage fabric items that you've had for years. Your granny's handbag. That's why
I think curtains.
Yeah.
But I do think, going back to what Madelaine was saying, I don't think you think of Prada as a kind of a brand where you see. Well, Mrs. Prada, you don't expect her to do a lot of like historical referencing. You never think of her bringing in historical dress, and this collection has more flashes of that. You know, the ruffles, you could say they're 70s, but they equally could be from historical dress, and I think that's quite interesting.
I think that she's, you know, if you look at the last Prada collection, it was, you know, Metropolis, it was so futuristic. Those huge like stormtrooper boots, and maybe she just kind of went back to the basics and I think the fabric was from her archives, weren't they? Like actually I mean, I've got a box at home of all this like random fabric that you know you'll do something with at some point, and maybe she has a similar thing. I'd love to kind of see the insight into has she got that box and is she that hoarder that I am? And finding she's actually I'm going to make an incredible collection.
Yeah.
But who knows if I'll start getting out of sewing machine.
Yeah, you have to start brocading
that. Watch the space. Watch the space. Yeah.
So do we like this? Is it something? It's given us lots of food for thought, but I feel like usually Miu Miu's collection, they're very they kind of grab you, I think, and they can be quite witty and pithy, and especially for the last few seasons, I think you either kind of love it or you hate it immediately. Whereas this one feels a little bit more subtle. It's not as kind of immediately impactful as like the plasticky one. But is that a good thing?
I like this. I think that's good. I didn't actually understand the previous one, not Resort, but the one before that. I mean, just girly in a way I just couldn't understand, and it didn't seem to be put into a different context. It was just girly. Whereas this has got a lot more oomph to it, and it feels like that intelligent evaluation of women and ages and what women should and shouldn't be doing at different ages, and that's when I like Miu Miu.
That's when you like it.
So yeah, feels more daring, feels more interesting than that. So yeah, I like it.
You like it.
I like it. I wasn't. I was thinking that it was going to be more girly, so I'm sort of quite nicely surprised.
Yeah.
So
I adore it. I basically want to wear every single piece of it.
I was going to say we're of a similar age, and for me, it feels like what I should be wearing at this age.
Yeah,
I've really started
when you're in that like weird. No, but when you're in that weird like I shouldn't be dressing like a 12-year-old anymore. Yeah, but I should start wearing some like.
But then you don't want to give up your identity as well.
You know, I think because I'm at that moment where my identity I feel is really in flux, and I think,
oh my god, I feel less like sure of myself than I was so sure of myself when I was 18.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it's part of working in the fashion industry, but you know, you're just bombarded by different types of women. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I want to be this girl, but then I want to be this girl, but then who am I? You know, all that kind of.
Yeah. You go through lots of phases like that.
But I think she makes that okay.
This is what I mean. She looks like a girl in flux, but she looks good with it.
Yeah.
You know, she looks.
But I could wear this as well,
moment.
and I could be your mum.
No, that's so true. She does look like a girl in flux, and that's maybe why it goes back to what you were just saying there. And I think that's maybe why I like it more this season, because the season before and for that, she didn't feel like a girl in flux. She felt like a particular girl at her point in her life. Whereas now it's a bit like she's trying to grow up, but she doesn't really want to, and she doesn't quite feel comfortable in her pencil skirt, so she's wearing a crop top. It is that kind of like, she's a bit of a mess, but in a really good way.
A really hot
She's
mess.
a hot mess.
Yes,
what a note to end the season. Should we give Mrs. Prada a very well-deserved clap?
Yay.
Thank you, guys.